Narendra Modi is winding his way down towards the end of that 11-kilometer long road show that is taking place in Surat. We'll break away from that to come to our story that we're debating tonight. And if you've been online, you certainly feel the buzz about it. Several of you watching this broadcast already have a strong opinion on it. And many more of you have hit back, hit out, and even uninstalled Snapchat after reports emerged late yesterday that the CEO of Snapchat had, in a meeting earlier on with staffers of the company, referred to India as a poor country and not something that a rich man's or rich woman's application like Snapchat would like to expand in. Furor has broken out in India despite some self-goals by a few politicians. We are opening up our phone lines to what you think has happened, and the question is very simple. 600 million young people below my age, under 30 in this country, have they taught the world a lesson? When everyone from Tim Cook to Satya Nadella to Sundar Pichai, all of these top Fortune 100 CEOs are looking to invest big in India, have CEOs who think that they can do without us been taught a lesson today? Listen in, and then we open up the conversation as well as to your calls.
I think if he comes here, he'll probably be surprised by the might and the growth and the prosperity and the good things that are there in this nation. And I would only say I pity him, and God give him better sense.
The reality is that the government of India is not opening its eyes. If the CEO has said something, it's absolutely correct. India is still suffering.
Once a denial is...
Okay, let's open up this conversation quickly to our guests and your callers on the broadcast. With me, Santosh Desai. He is the CEO of Future Brands, joining us on the broadcast. He is that story. He is a man who recognizes the India story perhaps best. Dilip Cherian, a man who has been spending his entire life and career marketing the India story, is joining us on the broadcast. Madhav Nalapat stays on with us. Also joining me on the broadcast, Vivan Saran, a partner of the Cohen Advisory Group that advises companies on the India story. If I can, let me begin straight at the top, sir, with a simple question to you, Mr. Santosh Desai. We don't know what he said, how he said, what he meant to say, but we know what has happened subsequently. Millions of people in India have been online, writing, talking, and have actually managed what he meant to say, but we know what has happened subsequently. Millions of people in India have been online, writing, talking, and have actually managed to downgrade one very popular global application on the Apple server from a 4-star rating to a 1-star rating. It's a telling lesson for every entrepreneur across the globe, sir.
Said, because we only have the word of one employee as to what he allegedly said. But I think it does serve out a lesson, and it sends a strong message. I think in today's day and age, to make statements of this kind, which are unwarranted, insensitive, and given the fact that India is currently in a sort of fairly heightened state of self-awareness when it comes to these things, I think it is asking for trouble, and he certainly got it.
Okay, it's asking for trouble. Vivan Saran, we know the brands across the globe. It's not a coincidence that a Jeff Bezos of Amazon is spending $1 billion here in India, that everyone from Apple upwards downwards wants to make in India, get tax breaks, see to the Indian market, see India as a growth opportunity. But is there a self-awareness that Santosh Desai is talking about amongst the young people in this country, the 600 million of them, realizing the power they are in the globe now?
There is an increased self-awareness. I absolutely agree on that. But I think given the merits of what we've heard so far, we've only had a lawyer clarify that this is not something that has come out of Snapchat. This case emerges from a disgruntled employee or so, Snapchat claims. So I think there are at least two inferences that we can make with this sparse amount of information that we have. One is that we have to make no mistake about it. The new economy, which is represented by Snapchats and Facebooks of the world, is as cutthroat, if not more, as the old economy. So you will have cases of corporate governance that would have to be taken care of. I think some of these companies have grown very fast and would need to put in place the requisite structures within to make sure that this doesn't happen whether or not the situation was warranted or not. The second is that I think CEOs of these companies, and American companies in particular, tend to be particularly insular, need to realize the realities of working in emerging and developing countries, and they need to not be guided asymmetrically by their legal fraternity or legal opinions should not filter through into corporate communications. And in this instance, I strongly feel that the CEO of Snapchat should have clarified the issue.
And he hasn't, and perhaps that's something that has got to filter in once a shop opens in the United States this morning, because it's early in the morning there. Dilip Cherian, but here's the stark reality. You've now seen young Indians. These are young Indian users using this what is in effect a photo filter software that has become wildly popular. 4 million odd Indian users, young Indians making a stand, and that hefty weighted stand has really bitten Snapchat, bitten it on Twitter, bitten it in terms of its ranking on Apple, is bitten them really hard and fast. Is young India realizing what a consumer base it is?
I think that I think that there is no doubt about the size of the Indian consumer base, from Tim Cook to Jeff Bezos to everybody. Everybody recognizes the Indian market is huge and it has the power of the thumb. It's in everybody's hands because we are also the second largest mobile phone country in the world. Having said that, however, there is an element of being thin-skinned about this. You're dealing with a $20 billion company, and it has a certain market cap, and it also has a certain logic. CEOs definitely need to worry about the image of companies like this, because they become vulnerable without realizing sometimes the damage that they may be causing. One doesn't know exactly the facts of the situation, as the two people previously have spoken, and therefore we are talking with very little evidence at this point of time. There's no doubt that the CEO should have actually come out and quickly retracted what was put out by a disgruntled employee. That is the big thing that's missing. People don't realize that today young India votes with their fingers, and CEOs need to retract almost on the bounce. They cannot afford to wait for lots of cogitation and for lots of legal advice.
Yes.
That's a mistake that too many people are making because of the fact that we are now living in the internet economy where everything happens 24/7 and there is no choice of taking time.
Okay, it's happening quickly. Madhav Nalapat, but it's one is what happened and what he said or did not say. We don't know. We don't have it on record. We have the version of a man who's an issue, is in a legal tussle with that company. But the fact and the way it has gone viral, where young Indians have been coming out, telling each other, rallying each other to make a stand, that is more of a story than perhaps what was said or not said. And I keep coming back to the question, are young Indians now realizing for the first time the weight they have in influencing how global companies operate?
Well, Rishabh, I just want to say that I don't share the view of some of the people on this panel that just because you are, there's a person who's an employee and who's got a smaller bank balance than the chap who's a CEO, he may be telling a lie, and the CEO who may be backtracking may be telling the truth. I mean, it's entirely possible that this gentleman said what he said. I mean, we have seen other cases of a similar kind of arrogance. I can only say that this man seems to be completely clueless about the world. I mean, the middle class in India is almost as big as the population of the United States. So he seems to be clueless. Having said that, what is really heartening about this is the fact that our youngsters seem to be proud of our country in a way, frankly, in practice, many of their seniors have not been. I mean, all the seniors talk about this country, but they don't do very much to demonstrate that pride. I mean, or they do something purely symbolic. Now, these youngsters have shown that they are proud of their country and they will protect and defend the honor of their country. And the last point I want to make is, it's a shame, frankly, a country with such brilliant people as India, as yet we have not created a governance system where you can have an Indian Amazon, an Indian Microsoft, an Indian Huawei, or an Indian Motorola. Now, all these are foreign companies, and they are using this market as their biggest market, whether it's China, whether it's the US, whether European companies, they're all using India as a very huge market, and Indian companies, Indian brains are nowhere in this, except, frankly, as employees of these other companies.
Okay.
So I hope this will be a wake-up call.
All right,
to
it's
the
a wake-up call.
in India.
It's
to
a message.
ensure that
It's
this kind of,
a message.
you know,
Okay,
this
Mr.
kind
Desai
of
wants to come in.
individual is not allowed to control the market.
Okay, Mr. Desai, quickly then I take a couple of callers.
Hello?
Sir, if you can hear me, go ahead, Mr. Desai. Then I'll take a few
Yeah,
callers.
yeah.
Santosh Desai, go ahead, please.
Most of these panel people, they are from metros. No,
Okay, Sunil, the caller is going on air first. Sunil, go ahead.
Yeah, most of these panel people, they are living in metros, they are living in, big cities. There are people, large patches of people living out there who don't have drinking water. There is no drinking water, and there are people selling filters, water filters for 8,000 rupees, and NGOs are out there going to villages and selling water filters for 3,000 rupees, and we have got such a scenario, and we are talking about Snapchat and all these people who are talking, they're all people from metros.
Okay, so you're making a point that let's not shy away from the fact that there are challenges within India, but Santosh Desai wanted to make a point. Santosh Desai, if you can hear us, go ahead.
No, I think, it's true that, there are challenges. And I mean, it's not as if, it cannot legitimately be said that, poverty exists in India. The only thing is that for an international CEO to make that point, if indeed he did make that point, I think is really insensitive. And it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense that in a market that which would potentially be a huge market for you, you offend that, the people of that country by saying something insensitive and quite frankly stupid.
Okay.
So I think to that extent, this is a fail. I mean, this is a big fail from as far as.
What lessons do we draw, Santosh Desai? What lessons do we draw from what has happened? Of a realization, perhaps, that all the talk about demography, all the talk about a young India, a new India rising, is actually something that is happening in effect. It's no longer something that can be discussed on paper. It is something that is to be pulsed on the ground. Have we caught the pulse ourselves, sir?
Well, I would be a little circumspect about that. I mean, I would be a little. Yes, it is. I mean, there is obviously India has a strong representation in the online world, and currently there is this great sense of fervor that with which Indians react to any real or perceived slight that they experience. So I think there is this mass mobilization that happens very quickly, and real or perceived slight that they experience. So I think there is this mass mobilization that happens very quickly. And this is true not just in India, this is true globally. The online world is hyper-reactive. And therefore companies have to be aware and alive to the fact that this is so. In India, there is this awakening, perhaps sometimes carried out to an extreme, but that awakening does exist, and if companies are not aware of it, of the power of that awakening, they will suffer.
Okay, let me put it, Vivan, but dynamics are changing. The lessons are changing. How companies are approaching this changing. I remember discussing with you the amount of data usage that is happening per Indian is dramatically changing now. Are our governance systems, is our political establishment, is the global corporate establishment aware of that change and being able to absorb it because it's happening really fast around us?
That's a good question, Rishabh. I think obviously when you're starting a company and when you grow very fast, your core concern is around your core business proposition. And I think CEOs and corporate leaders are encouraged to be narrow-minded in their focus when they begin these companies. The venture capital and private equity then further that comes to support these companies also re-emphasizes in many ways the sheer corporate grit with which you have to approach your business. Having said that, this is a company which is already IPO. So it has a set of stakeholders that go beyond just the immediate user. There are shareholders, there are stakeholders, there are affected communities that are much broader. And I think to this point of how technology companies that are public companies respond to some of these challenges that their own sphere sometimes throws up, whether it is of news spreading very fast or of people having access to all sorts of content that might support or counter the narratives that they want to put out. I think it's time for us to also in India talk about a new social contract, because we have over the last 4 months or 5 months, Rishabh, we have 100 million people who've come online.
Yeah.
Thanks to the geo phenomenon, albeit. But this is no mean feat, and I think that this necessitates a conversation.
And it's happening so
on
fast. And this
stakeholder
is why we're having the debate.
responsibility.
It's not as much, Vivan,
around technology
about
companies or not is
Snapchat
not
per
the-
se. It's about the realization that so many changes are happening so fast. And they are happening organically, but they're happening also exponentially. Couple of callers joining us on the broadcast. Srinath is with us from Chennai. Srinath, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for taking my call. What has transpired from this particular event is people should be aware that India is wide and awake. There is a large consumer base that is here in India, which is using not only Snapchat but various other products. So when these people, especially when you see that Snapchat has around 4 million users in India at this stage, the CEO should have been careful in making the statement, not going into the
and careful in responding to it also, Srinath. And thanks for calling us and making that point. Dilip Cherian, this is it. This is the realization that this consumer base is not something static, as Vivan was pointing out. It is increasing exponentially. Its interconnectivity is increasing exponentially. Its hunger for data, its hunger for aspiration is increasing exponentially, perhaps faster than we all realize it.
You know, the 4 million people who are using Snapchat in India are a microcosm of what Snapchat is across the world.
Yes.
And the fact that they've been able to vote down the level of appreciation of the app is a signal of the power of numbers. India's biggest advantage at the moment is the power of numbers. And I'll go back to what Mr. Nalapat said. Actually, what is happening is that global investment funds and private equity players are actually trying to fold all the few successes, all the few unicorns that India has produced into their own global larger kitties, so that they can use them for what they want to make.
And that's not how it should be.
The fact is that India outside of China is that's not how it should be.
And India should be the focus.
We should be finding ways to make sure that these companies should be able to stand on
And
their
we need
own.
to make our companies stand. I'm short of time, sir. Madhav Nalapat, last 30 seconds, sir. What's the final lesson we draw for them from this, sir?
Well, as Dilip said, you know, I've just come back from China this morning, and there you have giant internet companies that are entirely Chinese. You've got giant companies for mobile telephones that are entirely Chinese. And what a change from India. Let's be honest, Rishabh, we are still in the bullock cart age so far as internet speeds are concerned. We are still in the bicycle age so far as internet coverage is concerned, in the sense of our people, the number of our people who can use the internet in a practical and meaningful way. So there is a long way to go. But the reality of the situation is that the young people of India want to go that way. And I would like to say, frankly, I'm a little worried about things like social compact, because all that normally becomes a government compact. That normally becomes another restrictive law. And we have far too many laws in India, including far too many laws governing the internet.
Okay,
The
so
reality
we have
younger
perhaps
people want more freedom. They want minimum government. Now, Prime Minister Modi promised that. That's what we need.
We have perhaps, and which is why we are having this conversation, a realization for all of you watching this broadcast, that there are 600 million young people who are hungry with their aspirations for what the world has to offer. It's a lesson for governance here back in India, it's a lesson for corporate governance, and it's a lesson for every entrepreneur as well as every global brand out there right across the world. Gentlemen, for having this conversation tonight, thanks very much, as well as our callers for joining us. Slip into a short break.